Yeah, so I think we should be live now. Let's confirm. Okay, so yeah, we are live. Hi everybody, those who are joining in or will be tuning in a moment. I am Anusha Sumani. I am MCW's Program Associate for Africa Programs. And as part of today's webinar, I'll be the moderator for today. And we'll be talking about some very interesting, we'll be doing some very interesting conversation, talking with some extremely amazing guests that we have for today. But before that, let me introduce you to the MCW Insights. MCW Insights is a newly launched initiative by MCW Global. And as part of it, every 2 weeks, we bring in different speakers, thought leaders and we engage with different organizations and stir conversations around important topics such as leadership, gender equality, oral health, volunteerism. And so what is our topic for today? Today, we're going to talk about volunteerism, becoming community change makers. As big of a topic that sounds, or a general topic that sounds, we're going to delve into some really interesting notions, and we're going to talk about some really some of the topics that have been around in quite some time. The notion of volunteerism is not old. I mean, it's not new. It's definitely old, but we're going to touch base on what are some of the themes that we learn about today. Volunteerism is also expressed as a basis of building human relationship. It is something that makes you feel connected with your own community. MCW Global, although we do not touch base directly on volunteerism, but as part of our work, volunteerism is very critical because a lot of our stakeholders are engaged with us as volunteers, such as our speakers at Young Leaders Access Program or YLC or Africa Program Seminar, or our mentors at YLA, or our community leaders in Africa Internship Program, our CLA interns. They're all volunteering their time. Our affiliate organizations board members, they're all volunteering their time because they feel connected to the community and they somehow believe in the work that MCW does or the affiliate organizations do. So we're going to be talking about today understanding the spirit of volunteerism. What is the true spirit of volunteerism? We're going to try to unpack it, not promising that we'll totally unpack this whole entire big notion, but we'll try to do that. The second is discussing how volunteerism is connected with leadership. The third is to burst some myths and understand some of the misconceptions around volunteerism. And lastly, understanding some of the ways in which a person can locally volunteer. So I wouldn't take much of your time. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers for today. So on the screen, you may be able to see our three wonderful guests. So first we have Liz. Liz is the founder and executive director of Core Africa. And it's a pleasure to have her on board. I think I am really inspired by the model of Core Africa and how it works. So it's really interesting to have you on board, Liz. How would you want to introduce yourself to the audience who are watching today?
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I think it's a great topic and an important topic. Core Africa was inspired by my Peace Corps experience. People might be more familiar with Peace Corps than Core Africa. It's Americans choosing to volunteering to go serve for 2 years in a foreign country, living in villages and helping local people. So when I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Morocco, young Moroccans used to ask me if they could be a Peace Corps volunteer so they could help their country, and I had to say no. So that's where Core Africa comes from. We have college-educated young Africans. We're in Morocco, Senegal, Malawi, and Rwanda. They don't serve in their own community. They go somewhere far away in their own country to a new community, getting out of their comfort zone. So there's that transformative experience for them, and then they can go serve in another country. So it's kind of an extreme form of volunteering because it's 10 months of service 24/7, but it is one model of volunteering that I'm looking forward to discussing with you today.
Well, I'm already very excited to hear about that model, for sure. Thanks, Liz, for your introduction. Next, we have Ifreet, who is our alumna from 2016 Young Leaders Access Program. And since then, she has returned as a mentor in 2018 and 2019. And since she has been not only as a mentor, as a mentee, she's contributed to MCW in various other capacities and continues to do some great work in her community in Bangladesh. Welcome, Ifreet, on board. The floor is yours to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for the lovely introduction, Anusha. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. We're really excited to share our journeys with you and share the spirit of true volunteerism. Myself, I'm Ifreet Taheea. Currently, I'm residing in Dhaka, Bangladesh. I recently graduated from North-South University with a bachelor's degree in marketing and international business. However, I did switch my career path, and now I am pursuing a master's in development studies in BRAC University, and will soon pursue my professional line in this field as well. Hopefully in a month, I start my new job. So I'm really excited to share my experience and journey, how a business graduate turned her life in a different route and chose the development sector. So it's going to be really interesting because I started volunteering when I was 12 years of age. And ever since, I think I've racked up over 1,000 plus hours. So it's going to be really interesting. And I'm really looking forward to having a meaningful conversation with you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Ifreet. Really excited. Next, we have Mathews. Last but not the least, we have Mathews, who is our MC-Zambia's board member. And he does some amazing work in terms of food and nutrition in Zambia. And so I'm really excited, Mathews, to have you on board. Welcome. The floor is yours. Introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Anusha. And yeah, I'm very excited. I've just noticed one thing, that I'm the only man in the discussion, but obviously I know that a lot of listeners might be, of my gender. Yeah, so my name is Mathews and I'm from Zambia. I work for the Civil Society Scaling Up Nutrition. I coordinate the Zambia country team, and at the same time, I also coordinate the East and Southern Africa Civil Society Network that is working to just improve, nutrition in about 16 countries. I'm also the past chair for the Global Civil Society Network, where we have almost all the civil society alliances that are just working to improve, just the rates of nutrition in their country. Yeah, so I do quite a lot of work when it comes to volunteerism. Just fighting hunger and malnutrition, I think is something that really sits very well with me. I've worked previously in the sexual and reproductive health space, but the moment I got in the food and nutrition space, I realized that there was a lot of work that needed to be done, and I found my purpose. So yeah, I'll get to discuss more of my volunteerism work and most of the things that I've come to learn, and things that I would actually share with a lot of listeners that are following the event. So thank you very much for now. I think that's my brief background and who I am. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mathews. I'm actually very excited to hear from each one of you after the introductions, and I'm like, let's begin already. So thanks once again for joining us today, and all those who are joining us and watching us. We have some comments pouring in. Make sure that if you have questions, to write them down in the comments below, and the team will send it to us, and we'll ask them in some course of time during the discussion to our speakers. So whatever questions you have, do make sure that you comment down, and then towards the end of the discussion, we'll also have some 10 minutes to take your questions. So make sure that you constantly comment if you have any question or comment. Yeah, so let's take a first question, and that's basically like so you guys spoke about your work with volunteerism, whether it was when you started at the age of 12 or with the organization or in your current capacity. I want to know, what was the first step? How did you guys step into this world of volunteerism? What was it like? What was the journey like? And we just want to understand, because Mathews talked about the purpose. and spoke about why. So just want to be able to understand your why of entering volunteerism world. So let's go with Ifreet first.
Thank you so yes, as I mentioned priorly, I actually started volunteering at the age of 12. Like any other teenagers, at that time I was in a really reckless, mischievous phase, and I really wanted to try out all the extracurricular activities that was being offered in my community. The city that I was living in and the community that I was in, it was not as accepting of girls being as active in social extracurricular fields as acceptable it is in other countries. So this advertisement popped up. It was a social media advertisement, and there was this organization called Bangladesh Youth Leadership Center, and they were offering a 1-month fully funded course on leadership. So I didn't know what leadership was, but I just knew I have been class captain my whole life. I got this leadership that so suits me, and I applied right away, and I was one of the recipients of that scholarship, and that's where my leadership journey began. I enrolled in the full-time program. I graduated after 30 days, and 27 days of those 30 days course was actually based in classroom studies. So we were talking about concepts such as the difference between authority and leadership. What sets it apart? Because in most of the South Asian countries, it's very easy to get confused, and it's very easy to set apart the difference between authority and leadership. And that was one concept that stuck by me, and I still try to remember the differences in every step of life. During the last 3 days of the program, we were given the responsibility to pick up an issue that was underlying in the community that we were taking our classes in, and do a community service project on it. And the project that we did was based in a madrasa. So for those who don't know, it's like an Islamic institution where kids go to study Arabic along with other educational materials. And what we did is we did a book drive. We collected books for them. And later on, we also made them participate in different kind of skits. So we were giving them a situation such as bullying. What happens when two of your friends are fighting? And how do you stop that fight? What are the actions that you need to take? And once the 3 days of community service program ended, we graduated the program based on our performances. So we were all paired with a mentor back then. And what happened was, after I graduated from the program, my mentor reached out to me and said that, hey, I'm opening a new organization called Dust Free Bangladesh, and I would love to have you as one of our team leaders. So that's when the journey started. I was still 12. And I applied to be a team leader, and I got the position. Later on, I became a zone leader, and we were later on, when I was 14, I got the opportunity to participate in the Kennedy Lugar Youth Exchange and Study Program. And I was living in the US for a while. And that's when I got introduced to a different aspect of community service. I knew that people were actually counting community service by hours. In schools, it was mandatory for them to at least commit 20 to 40 hours to community service, to giving back to the community as a citizen of the United States. If this concept was introduced back in our country, how great would that be? So once I completed the program and I came back, I had racked up over 200 hours of community service. I was recognized by the US State Department. I was in full flow. I had the energy to come back and do my best to give back to the community. I knew that if I take one initiative, even though I was still young, I knew that I had gathered at least some certain communication skill that I could convince some of my friends at least to come together and do something to the community, even if it's just about picking trash. So that's when the journey started, and I think it has continued being so. And for me, the true spirit of volunteerism has been about being enthusiastic about giving back to the community. Like, you have to give back about your particular your surrounding. You don't have to really travel to the United States, or you don't have to really take a trip to Nepal to help out someone. It can be just helping someone out in the 10-kilometer radius, and you will do amazing things. So yeah, that's how my journey started. And I think that MCW played a really vital role because I opened my organization, 3.5 billion Reason, which targets empowering young women in our community. And MCW was the YP program, the Young Leaders Access Program, was how I knew I already had the skills, but the MCW platform provided me with the other resources that I needed to launch my program. And it's going well so far.
Great. Thanks, Ifreet, for elaborating your journey. And I think there's somebody who also asked that how did you actually start volunteering at the age of 12? So you've actually answered that question as well. So, I mean, one thing that I could pick up is the sense of enthusiasm and giving back to the community. Whether, as Ifreet said, it's not like traveling somewhere, but it has to be, I mean, I think it's great for one's exposure to travel, but it doesn't have to start with there. It can also be working in a 10-meter radius. And it's all about how you take volunteerism. And for Ifreet, it was like starting locally and then going somewhere and contributing. So that's what her journey has been like. Thanks, Ifreet. Mathews, what about you? How did you enter into the world of volunteerism?
Okay, so thank you very much for the question. So probably I can trace my volunteerism work back when I decided to just advance sexual and reproductive health in my community. And I realized that there were quite a lot of myths, there were quite a lot of things that were going wrong. And just being a person that felt like pushing the boundaries a bit just to get the welfare of people better. I even landed myself in trouble because I worked with a team of other volunteers that joined me, and we went to some community who are really interested in just advancing adolescent girls' sexual and reproductive health, because we're, in my country, about 30% of almost all the girls that are below the age of 19 are either pregnant or with first child. So that really bothered me. And, working with adolescents in a very cultural sensitive country or community becomes very, very dangerous at times. So, I remember moving into one of the communities and, just sharing information about sexual and reproductive health to young adolescent girls. And unfortunately, some of the girls were coming from school, which did not really sit well with their head teachers, who, reported to their parents, reported to the police. And it's the first and only time that I remember spending like about 4 hours of my time being interrogated by a full room of police officers who did not really, because they got negative reports from parents as well as the school where these girls were coming from. And yet all we were just trying to do is, share information and just secure the welfare of the adolescent girls so that they don't fall out of school and they don't fall pregnant. So that's where my journey started. But I guess where the true purpose, like I mentioned, like, in the nutrition and in the food and nutrition security space was, not so long ago in my country when, we had some very, very intense floods and droughts in some places. So we're getting reports that, people were going hungry. Some people were actually resorting to consuming, very poisonous roots because they didn't have any food because their crops died. Like these are rural parts where the livelihood is farming, and because you have not received rain because of the climate shocks, people were very hungry. And so I decided to take a drive in that part of the country, like in the southern half of the country where that effect was. And that was I guess a very terrible sight for me, because I saw a lot of women who brought their children to health facilities trying to seek medical attention, but I could clearly tell that it was hunger that was the problem and not any sort of disease. At that particular point, I also knew that we have influencers in our country, we have musicians, we have people that are willing to do some sort of good, like to give back to the community. So I quickly mobilized some of my friends who were influencers. Some of them were artists, and they were big names. And we took a risk by going, back to these villages, documenting what was happening, because at that particular point we were closer to elections, and our government was quite sensitive on what goes out, in publicity. So they would want to really have, a very good PR situation. So in my case, my friends who volunteered, to just make this as public as possible. We took this risk. We took documentaries, paid some small fees to online, platforms like online media in Zambia that we knew had huge followings. And what was even shocking is the fact that, you place some of these documentaries on the online platform. In the next hour or so, you see the government spokesperson, organizing their own press briefing just to undermine, the revelations that would come up with. And my team and I would actually even be followed by, the Secret Service, like wherever you're going, just for them to see whether, you are talking to the opposition, or maybe you're trying to your opposition leaders, or you're trying to just campaign the government. But at that point, I really found, my purpose, because we were able to mobilize, because of our action, we were able to mobilize over $10 million from the cooperating partners who took us, on the table and just discussed what was happening. And, a number of organizations were given some assistance to take some food response. Like we had a very bad situation in my country, but I guess that really gave me, that purpose, or really satisfaction, that I had managed to save probably a family or two who were likely to get, different diseases as a result of hunger, as well as also maybe in extreme cases, people would actually die. But I think that really gave me that purpose, and it made me just realize the influence that, some of the artists or some of the people that the volunteers that we work with, they're able to do some great advocacy and get help to the people who need it and make our communities better and save lives. So yeah, I guess in a nutshell, that's what. But I'll share more, I guess, as and when.
Absolutely. I think your point is also connected to the second question that I'm going to ask a bit later. But also what I could recognize is, what Matthew said is about recognizing the need in your community, right? And taking a proactive approach towards it. It could be different ways. It could be through mobilizing a group of volunteers together, doing advocacy on social media, no matter what creative ways that you might come up with, but also recognizing the need in your local community. So Liz, what about you? How did you step into the volunteerism work? We heard about you being, volunteer yourself. So a bit more about it, yes.
I think there's always been a culture of volunteering where I'm from, New York City, Girl Scouts, cookies, selling wrapping paper for the school uniforms, and walking the dogs at the local shelter, always things that needed to be done that you just do. But I think when I got older, starting to do more organized things. I used to volunteer for the foster care system, taking care of the kids who were just evacuated from the households. And helping them get settled for the night before they got placed in a foster home, that kind of thing. But that's I guess the key there is that there were organizations that created these volunteer opportunities. I wanted to help kids in foster care on my own. I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't know where to get started. But there was an organization that trained us, that recruited us, that created an opportunity, gave us a specific task to do. That was, a small part of the solution, but, wasn't our full-time job. And then later, I think I joined Peace Corps because there was a war going on, actually. There was the war in Bosnia, and I would see it on the news. And I wanted to help. I wanted to do something, but I wasn't going to join the army. That's just not me. And so I joined the Peace Corps because I wanted to find my place in the world. I think I was searching, and that's the point that I wanted to make here, is that when you don't know what you want to do, when you have the desire to help, I guess the thing to do is to just get out there. But having that desire is something that is a really important thing. It comes from your community. It comes from, your place, your opportunity. And my advice is to just get out and start. So that's how I got started.
Great. I loved how when you mentioned finding your place in the world. I think that's very, very profound. We're all searching for ways that how can we contribute, and there might be some organization that might be working in a similar cause, and we're like, let's get attached to that organization and let me contribute, let me start on my own. And there are always different ways of doing it. But I loved how you mentioned finding your own place in the world, and it's just getting it out there. Well, so based on what you guys also mentioned, I think some of you also touched base, a couple of you also touched base on this already. But if you were to talk about thinking back on your own experiences, right? Are there any specific instances where you felt or saw the impact of volunteerism on a community? Like it could be through your work, you saw it from somebody else's work, but in the world of volunteerism, if you have two stories to share, I think that would be really great for our listeners. Liz, let's start with you.
I was hoping you would start with me.
I got the vibe.
I experienced it personally through the Peace Corps, but I really want to talk about the Core Africa volunteers, who are young Africans who volunteer to go live in a remote community for 10 months of service, a month of training and then 10 months of service. And I think that, we train them to listen to local people. We teach them that if you want to help somebody, listen to them. That's their role. And their job is to be the facilitator and the catalyst. And so by wanting to help, they go in and they sit back. It takes humility in order to help somebody. It's not about you. It's not about what you think people need. If you go in just to engage people, to make sure everybody's heard, to bring everybody together to consensus around an idea, to mobilize them, to connect them to resources, that in itself is the most powerful contribution that you could make. Not being the savior and going in with the solutions, but really literally helping people help themselves. But you have on the wall behind you, trust the process. And I love that slogan so much, because that's really what it's all about. The volunteers, the Core Africa volunteers, we give them tools to facilitate this, a structure to this facilitation process, but it's the process of the people coming together and figuring things out themselves, and problem solving and being creative and working together and changing mindset. That's what's going to change people's mindsets, that they are able to do this for themselves. But I think it takes sometimes an outside catalyst to make it happen. And that's the role of our volunteers. So I think the moral of that story is humility. If you want to be a volunteer, it's not about you. Have some humility and you can make a big difference.
Absolutely. It's something bigger than you. It's not your focus. It's not fulfilling your needs. It's about, others into place. I loved how you said, I think it reminded me of that we're not going out with a solution, but also actually empowering the individuals out there, or empowering the community out there to support themselves. Like even when the model is no longer there, can this community sustain itself on its own? Is there sustainability involved?
Our volunteers go with no preconceived notion of what they're going to do. That's really key to their service.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, that was actually a question that I had for you. Thanks, Liz. That was very thought-provoking. Ifreet, are there any specific instances where you saw or felt the impact of volunteerism in your community?
I think there is a really recent experience that I would love to share. Of course, the COVID has not ended yet. It still has its lingering effect all over the world. When it initially started in Bangladesh, the lockdown started taking place from 2020 in March. March is when we all went into lockdown and we're not going to universities, and universities are actually still closed. So it has been over a year. a few of my friends, we took the initiative to start our own COVID relief program because, of course, Bangladesh it's a developing country and we have a lot of people who are living under the poverty line. So it was becoming very difficult for the daily laborers to earn their livelihood. The rickshaw pullers were not being able to go out. The markets were closed, and it was becoming incredibly difficult for them to even get themselves and their families feed one day meal. So the instant gleam of joy and hope through just handing over a meal to someone who went without a proper meal was rewarding enough for me. During COVID-19, our team raised $10,000, through which we were able to feed 2,300 people in Bangladesh and even provide medical funds and distribute care packages. Such instant and viral movement created a ripple effect because we were taking all the donations and the entire drive was actually a social movement. So we're doing it all online. We used our Instagram, we used our Facebook and other pages, and it was a closed group that was actually raising the funds. And it instantly created a ripple effect, and we were one of the first independent organization or independent group to do such a charity drive. And then other universities and other students started having their own drive, not only in Dhaka. So I'm living in Dhaka, so we were basically distributing the funds within Dhaka, but soon enough, Chittagong group opened up, and then there were some in Ratchahi and Joshua. So I absolutely love the ripple effect that it created, and that is, I believe, the power of volunteerism. I felt it, and I could feel that other people around me were feeling it too. They were not even scared about risking their lives and going up to those communities, which were really packed. They are very densely populated, but they still risked their lives and went out and helped other people out. And that selflessness is really one of the true qualities I think any volunteer needs. So yeah, that is a recent experience that I think I really enjoyed sharing with you.
Yeah, that made me recall actually one of the instances in actually Pakistan when there was a like a tsunami that hit in my city, and so I was very young. I was like I think 10 or 9, but I've grown up in a family where everybody else was like, were volunteers in my community. So my parents and I remember like I didn't know what was happening in the world, right? But I was like, so the entire week my parents were not at home and they were there in the relief camps and all of it, and I just didn't know what was it that made them so attached to these communities. And you're leaving behind your family and everything, but you're still there 24/7 working for something else, for other community. But of course as a child I didn't recognize that, but as I grew up I realized that there's something more than like a selflessness, like there's recognizing that there's something beyond you that's there and you want to give back. So thanks, Ifreet, that made me go back into my own story. So Mathews, could you share any specific instances where you felt or saw the impact of volunteerism?
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe before I talk about that, I guess for me, what has really helped me in just volunteerism is exercising, empathy and maybe having some bit of background in human-centered design, like where, before you respond to any challenges, needs of communities, you first of all, try to wear the shoes of the people who are affected. And then secondly, as you are trying to come up with solutions or a response to the need that is there, you really put the people that are, who are affected at the center of it all. And in some cases, you find that they would have the solutions to their problems. They would know what they want. And, if you just do it quite well and you don't really seem to be the person that knows it all or the savior mentality, but, that really helps just to get solutions that will be accepted and solutions that will have an impact on people. A good example that I can give on that, there was a time in my country when, some volunteers, of course, working with some other nonprofits, went and put some boreholes so that they could provide clean water to a particular community. But what they didn't realize is that when they put those boreholes, none of the community members was drinking from that clean water that they felt the community needed. And then later on, they decide to ask, like, why aren't you drinking this water? And they were later told that you went and sank boreholes at a place that used to be a grave site. So we cannot, go and start, getting the clean water from a place that for us is sacred and you did not consult us and all. So yeah, I guess, yeah, so just my emphasis would still be on exercising empathy. I think for me, just, thinking or just taking the experience that the affected people are going through has been very helpful to just also make me understand that, sometimes when things are going well for you, it doesn't really mean that everybody are having the same experience, but the moment you get to experience what they're going through, then you would all make the world a better place, because we would then now start championing, or just reducing inequalities and some of the challenges that people are going through. So I guess in a nutshell, that is that is the kind of response that I would give to the question that you just asked. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Mathews raised a very great point. I think, giving a seat on the table to the stakeholders, to the community itself. It's not like somebody else coming in and providing in the solution, but actually also involving. So I think when you talked about human-centered design, or when you Mathews spoke about empathy, it's like really being in the shoes of, your community. And being like, what do they need? I remember there are a lot of case studies where millions of dollars are injected into the community for the solution, and there's one case study in our own community, in my own community in Pakistan, and the community rejected it. They were like, we don't need the solution. And there was a hefty amount of investment that was made, and the community simply didn't use the solution. They're like, we don't need this. We actually needed this. So actually being able to empathize with your own community is really, really crucial. And it also connects with I love it how all the answers that you guys are saying, it's also connected with the next questions that I'm going to ask. Starting with that question, I think Mathews, you touched based on, and I think, Liz, you also mentioned about humility, and Mathews, you mentioned about empathy. I want to understand that what is the true spirit of volunteerism? Like, that is, what qualities does a volunteer entail, or what is the value system of a volunteer? Of course, we don't want to generalize it, that it's like the typical 8 qualities or 8 value system of a volunteer. We, of course, don't want to do that. But in your suggestion, in your experience, what qualities does a volunteer entail? Let's go with Mathews, since you left us off on empathy.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I'll speak a bit about the spirit of volunteerism and what it really entails. So for me, I believe that as a volunteer, you have to be ready to sacrifice, to make a few sacrifices. So when it comes to your time, you have to be really available so that you can be relevant to the cause that you are involved in. Time means that you sacrifice some time to understand the problem, understand the key stakeholders, and also as you are coming up with solutions, of course, the involvement of the people who are affected. You really invest all of that time so that the solutions that you all come up with will be accepted, and the solutions that will be long-lasting to the community. Apart from that, I know that sometimes as volunteers, we get to spend some financial resources of our own to some extent, because you would realize that maybe even just the simplest of being a board member of an organization, I would have to use my own data to join virtual meetings. I would have to use a bit of my own transport money just to be available for meetings and just be as relevant to the kind of work that we are involved in. And maybe finally, that I would mention, I know my colleagues on the call would have a number of responses, but finally, what I wanted to mention is the fact that we have to be ready to take risks. So as I indicated earlier, that you have maybe a politically charged environment or a culturally charged environment, how does that stop us from, being relevant to the communities? In certain cases, as a volunteer, you're forced to push certain boundaries just for the well-being of the people who are affected. So we have to be ready to take that risk and to make the sacrifice and save lives and just be relevant to the people and who really need our support, because it's all about serving the community and the life. So I end here. Thank you.
Thanks, Mathews. Those were very insightful points. So continuing with that, Liz, what do you think? What's the true, in your opinion, what's the true spirit of volunteerism?
Boy, that is a big question. I think it's different for different people. When we recruit Core Africa volunteers, we're looking for, we look for judgment, we look for maturity, but we also look for a sense of adventure and a very strong sense of idealism. And like I said, looking for people who are anxious to find their place in the world. But, we don't have a formula for identifying who's going to be the star volunteers, who are going to be the most successful. It's often the ones that surprise you, that are the quiet ones in the back of the room, who are the ones who stay at their sites and learn the local dialect. And, I think a really important quality is being a people person. Just really liking people and listening and humility and empathy and all of those things that come with it. I guess being open to that. And having an open mind. We have a challenge with expectations. We're actually training our volunteers in how to recognize their own expectations and how that can impact their service and the impact that they're able to make by if there's an expectation gap, and they actually can control, can set and manage their own expectations and the expectations of their communities on them. So there's a lot of complexities involved, and it takes a person who is open, who doesn't have fixed expectations of what they're going to do and how they're going to help people, and also are good listeners. I guess that would be my number one. And I thought Matthew's point about being a risk taker is also really, really important.
Yeah, there's being empathetic, humility, being open to adventure, being good listener, having people skills. I think some of these are a lot what CLA, our Community Leaders in Africa internship program, looks for. We look for people who are empathetic. Of course, they are people who have humility, but also somebody who's open-minded. And I think Liz also mentioned someone like in the very start, being able to come out of their comfort zone. So, that's also something that we look forward to. It's challenging, it's tough, it can be very hard at times. But being able to challenge themselves and being able to grow outside of their comfort zone is also one of the very crucial qualities. And I think also being adaptive is something that I was able to pick up from what Mathews and Liz also mentioned, that, there might be different circumstances and different situations, but how do you work around that community need in that way? Great. So, Ifreet, what in your suggestion, what is the true spirit of volunteerism? In all these experiences that you've had, what do you think what qualities does a volunteer entail, or values does a volunteer entail? Agreed. Are you there? Okay, so let's give it a minute.
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, absolutely. Were you able to?
I'm really sorry. Yes, I can hear you now. Should I touch base upon the question that was being discussed?
Yes, the qualities. Yeah, the true spirit of volunteerism.
Yes. I think from my personal experiences and from people who are founders of different organizations or initiatives, I think being a team player is the most important quality. It's really important because when you volunteer for a particular organization or you're volunteering for a movement, you are actually doing it without expecting to get something in return. Yes, certificates sound good, free meals sound good, Sometimes the transportation fees covered, they all sound good, but you have to go in with the expectation that you're not actually going to be receiving it on the receiving end, but you have to be on the giving end. And why being a team player is really important is because in the end of the day, the founders or the main team, they have certain aspects in and plans in mind. So to listen to it and to abide by it and then adapt to it, as you mentioned, accordingly, those all are skills that a volunteer really needs to have. And being a team player is really important because, for example, if one of your team member falls short in some cases, or they even fall sick, like literally they fall sick, you actually have to back them up and then make sure that the program is not halted or the event is not being halted and you are still able to carry it well. So having a game plan, a good game plan, and being someone who takes initiatives, these qualities are really important as well.
Wow. Being able to take initiative and having a plan in place. It's great points, Ifreet. Well, so I hope all of those who are listening in are able to take away some points and are able to also relate it with their journey of volunteerism. We are 45 minutes into the webinar. We have only 15 minutes left. We have some questions coming in. I have a question for Liz that we've just received. I'm just going to share in a moment. But also those who have questions, make sure that you write them down now. Now is the chance for you to ask our speakers your questions, and we have next 13 minutes, so make sure to comment below. Liz, so the question is like, what do you see as pros and cons of somebody volunteering outside their community? Since some of the volunteers actually volunteer outside their own community, what do you see as some of the pros and cons?
That is an excellent question. I think there are pros on both sides for the volunteer themselves, the transformative experience of getting out of your comfort zone. But the pro for the community itself is also having somebody come from the outside who is objective and also trained in being a catalyst, facilitator. We train them in human-centered design, and so they have the tools to manage the process without being part of it, and that's really important role. But they become part of the community. They live with the local people, eat what they eat, sleep where they sleep. They build the friendship and the trust that's important in the process. But having that be an outsider who doesn't have the baggage of the family and the taking sides and the history of whatever's going on in the community can be a positive. And it's also about building bridges between the different communities and the different regions. Getting to know people, your own countrymen, but who live in a different culture than you do, far away from home. Getting away from your family is really a powerful experience for these young people who are usually right out of college and first time really going off on their own and doing something, really scary for them. Cons, I don't know. Cons of leaving your village. I mean, we actually, I mentioned earlier that we give volunteers the chance to go serve in another country after they've served somewhere else in their own country. We want to give them the chance to go serve in their home community too, once they've served somewhere else, because I don't think it would work if they just all of a sudden were a Core Africa volunteer serving in their own community. I think if they went away and they went through this process and they saw the change and the transformation of the communities happen, then they would come back, and we have yet to try that. We may try that this year, having a community volunteer. But I do think the getting away first and then coming back and implementing it in their home community is an important element for their success. I hope that answers your question.
Great, thanks for answering. I think you spoke about like the intercultural exchange, which we've not touched base yet. I think that's really crucial part of being able to make bridges, right, between different regions, cultures, and having that set of intercultural exchange. I think that's a powerful experience on its own. And being able to be objective. I think sometimes we become also very biased with our own community needs. we feel that we know and we want to implement what we think. But I think having a new set of fresh lens and being able to see it from a fresh perspective, I think that adds a lot to the perspective as well. But how does one create a balance between the two, right? Not being able to force that solution onto somebody else, but also having saying that, hey, I do recognize that there's a need, but at the end of the day, it's the community that will decide, right? So not being there as somebody who's like the dominant person. Hey, I know it. I'm outside the community and I know what it is right for you guys. So I think there's a fine line.
Mathews talked about that earlier. I mean, these communities know what they need. They just need somebody to listen to them and be a catalyst.
Absolutely. So let's be at it, and before we move on to our next question, how can people, because people are asking some questions around it as well, how can people join Core Africa, or what's the process of it? Like, how can people be involved more with your work?
Yeah, follow us on Facebook and on our website. We will announce it. We're just starting training for this year's volunteers, but we'll start recruiting in the spring for the next groups. So, and then we're hoping to expand to more countries this year as well. So
great. So those who are interested and working with Core Africa, make sure that you are you sign up for the recruitment process and everything next in the spring time. And yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks, Liz. Our next question. So we have 8 minutes, so we're gonna see if we have more questions coming in from the audience as well. But we have a set of questions. So how is volunteerism connected with the aspect of leadership? Like, does it go hand in hand? And if so, how? Like, how do you all see this, the two notions? Mathews.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Yeah, so if you look at volunteerism, a volunteer should also be ready to take the leadership role. I think I had indicated earlier when I was talking about my experience that, you go to a place, you realize that, yes, you need a collective voice and you need to mobilize some, other influencers, who can also just support your campaign or what you are really trying to get the communities, solutions for. So it calls on a lot of leadership. You have to exercise that leadership, to mobilize with them and for them. You have to also just embrace the whole true leadership, principles. You cannot be seen as a savior, as I indicated, but you would have to be seen as a person who's being relevant in that space. So one has to have to embrace the element of a leader for them to really bring about the change that the communities really need. Yeah.
So I think these are very great points that it's both volunteerism and leadership are connected, and I'm very interested also to hear from Ifreet and Liz about this. Ifreet, let's move on to you also because you've served as you've been part of MCW's leadership programs as well. So, and you've been part of that part of leadership, and how do you see both of these points being connected?
I definitely think that there is a deep connection. Through volunteerism, you become more aware of the community's needs and get the chance to improve skills such as communication, empathy, and so on. For one, I was more aware of the underlying problem of my city once when I was doing research for BYLC, and then later on when I was doing research for MCW, because of course, to all the listeners out there, if you're applying to MCW, you will know that for the application process, you really need to research your community and then apply accordingly. It's a vital aspect of the application process. So when MCW happened, I was certain that I want to pursue it professionally. I want to pursue this line. And despite of having a business degree, I never stayed away like strayed away from taking initiative in challenging times, such as the COVID situation that I had mentioned before. Volunteering can really bring a change in time of uncertainty. And even as a volunteer, you may be put in positions where you lead and coordinate teams, prepare program framework, and much more. Or a leader to your peers and motivate them to take their own initiatives. And it, of course, creates the ripple effect that I keep on mentioning over and over again. One such example that I really take pride in, because it was a Bangladeshi startup. Back in 2014, there was this organization called Critical Link. And the organization was founded as a non-profit social business. And what they did is they created, they came up with a volunteer training program. So the first responders through an app based on the locations that they were sent notifications that, hey, an accident took place around you. So if you're around that area and if you're willing to help, you can sign up and go to the closest scene. And I think that was a fantastic initiative taken by Critical Link, because a lot of us, we want to take initiatives. We have that leadership quality within us, but then we don't know where to really channel this skill or how to really start our initiative. So such technologically driven or digital programs or even online programs, they are a really good way to start. Whether you have leadership qualities that you want to vent out by taking volunteer activities, or you have the volunteering mindset, but you don't think that you're a leader yet. So there are a lot of programs out there, after doing which you will definitely see the deep connection that lies there. That's
Well, thanks, Ifreet, for that. Liz, what do you think?
I think that Core Africa is a leadership training experience. You know, our approach to development is, our volunteerism is servant leadership. That's what it is. And it's, if you want to be a leader, you know, you need to first walk in people's shoes. If you want to help someone, you walk in their shoes for a mile first. If you want to be a leader, you should do something like Core Africa first, or volunteer first, so that you gain the humility, you gain the experience. You know, these young people, they're taking leadership training courses. You know, when I hire somebody just out of college, I want to hire a follower. I don't want to hire a leader. I want to hire somebody who's going to be a team player. And, you know, leadership abilities come up over time. You know, they take leadership over as they grow, but, you know, not coming in to be a leader. We want them to come in to be a listener and to be a facilitator and to guide the process. And I think that that's really important. These are to want to be a volunteer, I think, demonstrates strong leadership skills, but you need to be a follower before you can be a leader.
Wow. So I think what I'm able to collect from your responses is, like, of course, it goes hand in hand, volunteerism and leadership, and more often, like, volunteerism could be the first step towards building your leadership journey. Or first step, or the initial steps, as Liz said, you know, being able to walk in somebody's shoes first, you know, it comes with a servant leadership first, be able to, and also what Mathews and Ifreet have been saying about humility and about empathy, being able to empathize with your community first before saying in, like, hey, I'm a leader, I'm gonna like lead you all, rather than what Liz said, become a follower first and then taking on to that journey.
If you want to be a CEO, you should start in the mailroom.
Absolutely. That's what I think most like great phenomenal leaders, they start off as volunteers within the organization and cross every. I think that's also a great point, because if you don't know what you know, for example, a mailroom person, like the responsibilities of the mailroom person is, how would you be able to empathize with them in the first place as a CEO? I think there's a great point. So we're 1 minute down to the webinar, and we are just gonna ask one last question that we have for Mathews. And so Mathews, before we start wrapping up, we have one last question for you. And somebody's asking, like, about your role as a board member. How has it changed how you think about volunteerism? Like your work as MC-Zambia board member, how has that influenced?
Yeah, so I think my work as a board member for MCZ, there's a lot of commitment when it comes to time, as well as also expertise. So, like one of the biggest examples that I can give is that currently I've been just working with the country team, the country manager, just to help them develop their resource mobilization strategy. So just having a background of resource mobilization and working in nonprofit organizations has given me some set of skills that I'm now trying to also just ensure that the team can get the similar skills that I feel I've gained over time from my previous work. So apart from just that, also just helping or supporting the country team when they're developing strategies to ensure that they're looking broader, apart from just raising resources, but expanding the organization beyond just the current reach, which we felt as a board that was quite small. So yeah, so I think that a number of ways that I'm using my time to just support the country team just to grow. And yeah, I think so that kind of volunteerism is also something that I really cherish now, because sometimes you even find that most of our meetings are on weekends, time when we expect most of the board members to have some time off from work, but would still sacrifice some time and the like. So it has really helped me just to see how we can make MCZ to grow from where it is today, so that the good programs that they have and the good plans that they have can go beyond the current reach, and they also get fundable within the the funding space that we have available here in Zambia.
Well, thanks, Mathews, for that. I think we all cherish the work that the contributions that the MCX board members make to the affiliate organizations, and it's always great to hear the feedback or the time that you guys volunteer for the affiliates. I think it's always very it's an honor to witness that. So thank you, Mathews. So wrapping up, let's take next 15-20 seconds for our speakers to, so you guys, if there are any concluding remarks. We spoke about a lot of things today, we tried to unpack the jargon of volunteerism out there, and we spoke a lot about the values, the sense of being empathetic, the sense of finding your place in the world, recognizing community needs. What are some of the top values, the true spirit of volunteerism? So a lot of these notions and impact stories from around the world. I would also want to thank our speakers for joining in. Thank you all, Liz, Mathews, and Ifreet, for today. It's been a personally very enriching experience for me to hear from you guys. And any last words for our audience who's watching? Ifreet, let's go with you.
I really want to encourage the young leaders, the youth out there, to make the proper use of social media. I'm a big fan of social media, but you just need to know how to use it correctly. I think that there are a lot of resources out there, such as youthopportunities.com, where you can look up for volunteering opportunities. That's one of the websites through which MCW Global was founded by almost like 10 to 15 applicants. So I really think it's really important that you take the help of social media or take the help of internet and really use those resources correctly and in the right way, and find spaces where you can really make a meaningful change.
We lost Ifreet, but I'm sure so she's gonna tune in back. I think there was some internet connection problem, but she was talking about connection like on social media and being able to utilize the power of social media as well. I think Ifreet does some great work regarding content, digital content as well. So Liz, over to you.
Final words.
Final words, yes.
I think people who joined in this conversation have what it takes to be a great volunteer. I mean, that's the initiative it takes and just get out and find some place to volunteer and just do it and see where it leads you.
Great. Thanks, Liz. Mathews.
Yeah, so for starters, I think this has been a very great conversation because a lot of rich information has come out. So for me, I think my last words are that, as a volunteer, you have the potential to bring about a lot of good and to work as a catalyst in the community to bring, the kind of help that they need. So just learning from experience and seeing how, be it in sexual and reproductive health or food and nutrition and other areas, volunteers can bring that change, and it's quite satisfying, and helps you to find your space and your purpose. So please let's take advantage of this space and just help communities be or just provide a better world for everybody to live in.
Absolutely. Thank you all for tuning in today. All those who were watching, commenting, and asking questions. Thank you. Thank you all to our speakers, Liz, Mathews, and Ifreet, for joining us today. I think it was a very profound conversation where we touched base on like you're finding a place in the world, and just going out there and seeing and taking one step at a time. And it's something that's more, it's a spirit that comes from within. It's something that you want to contribute to the community out there. It's something more powerful or bigger than you. Great. Thanks everybody. I know we are 7 minutes over time, so won't take much longer. Thank you all for joining in today. If you guys have any questions, any suggestions for us for our next upcoming webinar series, do let us know, do write to us, and let us know what topic we would like us to talk on, and we'll be surely bringing in some amazing guests for our next webinar. Thank you all. Liz, Mathews, and Ifreet was there with us. Thank you guys for joining in today, and we'll see you next time around. Bye.